Yet, for all its grandeur and advanced technology, it faced a problem that even its brightest minds and strongest warriors could not solve. Deep within the treacherous Calthros asteroid belt lay a relic of unimaginable power, a shard from the core of eternity, said to amplify the mind of its wielder. The Empire's leaders believed it could tip the balance in their favor in their eternal struggle against the rebellion brewing on their borders. But claiming it was another matter entirely. The asteroid belt was no ordinary stretch of space debris. Gravity anomalies churned its innards like a cauldron, and jagged rocks the size of moons collided with thunderous force. Ancient remnants of a forgotten war still patrolled its depths, automated machines with singular directives to obliterate intruders. For decades, elite alien task forces had attempted the mission, only to meet their ends in silence, their ships reduced to drifting wreckage. The Empire's High Council was at its wit's end, and so the humans were summoned, not out of respect, but desperation. "Let me get this straight," Captain John Runholm said, leaning back in his chair, the sharp line of his jaw tensing as he studied the holographic map of the asteroid belt. "They've sent everyone else to die, so now it's our turn?" A ripple of low chuckles ran through the room, a sound tinged with the kind of gallows humor that only battle-hardened soldiers could muster. John's team sat around the briefing table, each of them a testament to humanity's unorthodox survival in the galaxy. There was Lieutenant Samir Afalayan, whose engineering prowess had turned a derelict freighter into a fully functional dropship under enemy fire. Beside him, Corporal Lucas Gearhead Grayson fiddled with a device that looked like it might explode any second. Then there was Sergeant Chris Vane, the squad sniper, silent but ever watchful. Every man there had faced impossible odds before and lived to tell the tale. A voice crackled through the room's comm system, breaking the tense camaraderie. It belonged to a Zilthorian envoy, a spindly alien whose translucent skin pulsated faintly under the light. "Humans," the envoy began, its voice a lilting blend of condescension and irritation. "The High Council has deemed this task beneath further attempts by superior species. You will be provided with basic intelligence and minimal support. Do not expect a rescue." Chris grunted. "Real charming. They can't even fake some encouragement." John smirked but didn't respond immediately. He turned his attention back to the map, his sharp blue eyes scanning the outline hazards. The Calthros belt was every nightmare he'd ever imagined brought to life, a swirling mass of chaos where order went to die. Still, a flicker of determination sparked within him. He wasn't about to let the Empire write off humanity as expendable. "They think we'll fail," John said, standing. His voice carried a quiet authority that instantly drew his men's focus. "That's fine. Let them. We've done more with less before. Samir, I want a full diagnostic of our ship systems. Gearhead, your on-field equipment. Chris, start mapping potential sniping vantage points, even if they're theoretical." "What about you, Captain?" Samir asked, rising to his feet. John looked at the envoy, who remained on the screen, its gelatinous eyes narrowing. "I'll be making sure our support is enough to get us in and out alive." The envoy's sneer was almost imperceptible. "Your bravado is noted, Captain. May your primitive instincts serve you well." As the connection severed, John let out a long breath. He knew this mission was more than just a suicide run. It was a test. Humanity's place in the Galactic Empire had always been precarious. Seen as brash, chaotic, and stubbornly individualistic, humans were often relegated to roles that played to their resourcefulness, but rarely earned them respect. Failure here wouldn't just mean their deaths. It would confirm every alien's low opinion of their species. 2 days later, their ship, the Power, hung on the edge of the Calthros belt. The vessel wasn't impressive by Imperial standards, but it had one advantage. It was human-made. Reinforced hull plating and a suite of cobbled-together upgrades made it far tougher than it looked. John stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, as the crew finalized preparations. "We're entering the belt in 5, Samir called out, his hands flying across the console. Remember, John said, his tone calm but firm. This isn't just about surviving. It's about proving we're more than they think. We're going to show them what humans can do. The transition into the belt was violent. The ship groaned under the strain of sudden gravitational shifts, and the crew scrambled to adjust. Jagged asteroids zipped past the viewports, each one close enough to spell instant destruction. Sweat beaded on Samir's brow as he rerouted power to the shields, while Gearhead's muttered curses filled the air as he wrestled with a malfunctioning stabilizer. Contact! Chris's voice cut through the chaos. On the main display, a cluster of automated drones zipped toward them, their sleek forms bristling with weapons. John didn't hesitate. Evasive maneuvers. Samir, get me a targeting solution. Chris, pick your shots. The first volley from the drones lit up the darkness, but the power danced through the barrage, its human crew responding with a level of improvisation no machine could match. Chris's sniper rifle hummed as he fired from his perch, each shot precise and devastating. Within minutes, the drones were little more than scrap metal drifting in the void. As the dust settled, John allowed himself a small smile. The first hurdle had been cleared, but he knew the hardest trials lay ahead. Still, there was a growing confidence among the crew, a belief that, perhaps, they could do the impossible. Good work, he said, his voice carrying a note of pride. Let's keep moving. The relic isn't going to come to us. For a moment, the crew felt something rare and fleeting in the vast, hostile expanse of the galaxy. Hope. The power pressed deeper into the Calthros asteroid belt, its reinforced hull groaning against the constant assault of micro-impacts. The crew worked in unspoken rhythm, each man focused on his role as the stakes climbed higher. Beyond the jagged rock formations and gravity anomalies, the relic lay hidden, its location marked by faint, intermittent pulses of energy. Every passing moment brought them closer, but also closer to danger. John Runholm stood at the bridge, his expression impassive as he surveyed the chaotic landscape through the main viewport. His mind was a churn of strategy and contingency plans, though outwardly he remained composed. A leader's steadiness, he knew, was the anchor his crew relied upon. Adjust course by 3 degrees, John ordered. That cluster ahead looks like it's collapsing. Samir Affalayan acknowledged with a sharp nod, his hands dancing across the navigation console. Got it. Shields holding steady, but we're at 80% power. We'll need to reroute soon if we keep taking hits like this. Let me worry about the rerouting. Lucas Grayson chimed in from the engine bay over comms. Just keep us in one piece. Chris Vane, perched in a small observation pod near the ship's rear, spoke for the first time since entering the belt. Movement, not debris. Something alive. The crew froze. Chris didn't deal in speculation, and his voice, calm but weighty, sent a ripple of tension through the ship. Details, John demanded. 2 clicks off starboard. Using the rocks for cover. Patterns not natural. Chris paused, then added, It's closing. John pressed a button on his console, pulling up Chris's targeting feed. The screen flickered to life, showing shadows darting between the massive asteroids. Their movement was too precise, too coordinated to belong to the drifting debris. Gearhead, weapons online, John said. Samir, plot us a course away from whatever that is. Already on it, Samir replied, sweat beading on his forehead. But it's tight. If I push us any closer to that gravity well, we'll be stuck. John weighed the risk. We take the chance. Chris, eyes open. Fire only if they fire first. The ship shifted, engines whining as it banked hard to avoid the approaching forms. The shadows followed, their sleek outlines emerging from behind the cover of rock. Alien vessels, their hulls adorned with bioluminescent markings that pulsed like a predator's warning display, began to close the distance. John keyed the comm unidentified vessels. This is Captain John Renholm of the Power. We are on an authorized mission under the Galactic Empire. State your intentions. Silence answered. followed by a burst of energy fire that skimmed the ship's shields. "Intentions received," John muttered. "Gearhead, light them up." Lucas whooped over the comm as the power's weapon systems roared to life. Twin turrets swiveled and fired, bright streaks of plasma cutting through the dark. The enemy's ships were fast, darting in and out of the asteroid field with unnerving agility. But humans had a way of turning chaos into opportunity. "Chris, take out their leader," John barked. "One shot," Chris replied. The feed on John's screen showed him adjusting his rifle, waiting for the right moment. A shadow darted into the open, and Chris fired. The alien ship shuddered, a plume of green vapor erupting from its hull before it spiraled into an asteroid, disintegrating on impact. The remaining vessels hesitated, their formation breaking apart. It was all the opportunity John needed. Samir full thrust. "Get us out of here." The power surged forward, dodging asteroids with a precision born of desperation and Samir's unerring instincts. Behind them, the alien ships regrouped but didn't pursue. Their hesitation was telling. Whatever species they belonged to, they weren't used to being challenged. Once the ship was clear of immediate danger, John called for a systems check. Samir reported power reserves at 65%, and Lucas confirmed the weapons were still operational but running hot. "Those ships," Chris said, his voice thoughtful, "they weren't hunting us for sport. They were guarding something." John nodded, already drawing the same conclusion. The relic's energy signal had grown stronger during the encounter, almost as if reacting to their proximity. They were protecting the relic. "We're getting close?" "Great," Lucas said, his voice crackling through the comms. Love being on the wrong end of an alien honor guard. John allowed himself a small smirk. "That's why we're here, Gearhead. No one else could pull this off." The humor was short-lived as the ship approached a denser section of the belt. The energy signal grew erratic, spiking one moment and vanishing the next. The asteroids here were jagged and unstable, some spinning so fast that their edges glowed red from friction. And somewhere within, the relic waited. Samir adjusted the scanners. "The energy pulses are interfering with the readings. I can't pinpoint it, but it's in this sector." "Then we go in blind," John said. "We've come too far to turn back now." The crew fell into a tense silence as the ship navigated the labyrinth of rock and debris. Each man knew the danger but also understood the stakes. This wasn't just about the relic. It was about proving that humanity was more than the Empire's afterthought. Suddenly, the ship jolted, throwing John against the console. Alarms blared, and the lights dimmed as the power struggled to stabilize. "Report," John shouted. "Some kind of gravitational field," Samir said, his voice strained. "Localized and powerful. It's pulling us in." "Options?" "Not many," Samir admitted. "But if we can align the ship just right, we might be able to use the momentum to slingshot around it." "Do it," John said. "Everyone, hold on." The ship groaned under the strain as Samir executed the maneuver. The viewports filled with the blinding glow of the gravity well, a swirling maelstrom of light and heat that seemed eager to consume them. But at the last moment, the power broke free, tumbling back into open space. The crew let out a collective breath, though the tension lingered. John straightened, his jaw tight as he looked out at the still dangerous expanse ahead. "Captain," Chris said, his tone unusually sharp, "I've got something on the scanners. It's faint, but it's there." John turned to him. "The relic," Chris nodded, "or something protecting it." John's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we keep moving. Whatever's out there, we'll face it together." The crew exchanged glances, their determination renewed. They had survived everything the galaxy had thrown at them so far. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it with the resilience and ingenuity that only humans seem to possess. The power surged forward once more, its crew prepared for whatever came next. The wreckage of forgotten battles loomed ahead, shards of ancient warships floating like ghosts among the jagged asteroids. Time had stripped them of purpose, But the machines that once defended them still clung to their prime directive: destroy all intruders. The power crept forward, its systems running silent to avoid detection. Every man aboard knew this was the crucible that would determine their fate. John Renholm watched the scanner intently, the rhythmic blips marking potential threats. The relic's energy pulses had stabilized, guiding them to the heart of the asteroid belt. But as they drew closer, the faint signals of dormant war machines became impossible to ignore. He keyed the comms to his team. Eyes open. We're not alone in here. Understatement of the year, Lucas Grayson muttered, his voice crackling through the feed. I'm reading multiple heat signatures. They're cold, but not dead. Samir Afalayan tapped at his console, his fingers steady despite the mounting tension. Those things could activate the moment we trip their sensors. And with this many, there's no way we fight our way through. Then we don't trip them, John said firmly. Samir plot a course. Chris, I need you tracking anything that moves. Gearhead, stand by for a manual override if systems start glitching. The ship's engines hummed softly as Samir guided the power through the debris field. Massive chunks of alloy drifted past, some etched with alien symbols, others scorched from ancient energy blasts. The tension on the bridge was palpable, each man hyper-aware of the deadly game they were playing. One wrong move could awaken the silent guardians. A sudden burst of static filled the comms. Chris's voice cut through it, calm but urgent. Movement, 7 o'clock, 20 clicks. Small, fast. John glanced at the display, where a red blip darted across the screen. Scout drone. It's testing us. Want me to take it out? Chris asked, already sighting his rifle. Negative. If we fire, the whole swarm will light up. Let's see if we can slip by. The drone zigzagged closer, its erratic movements a stark contrast to the stillness of the field. Samir adjusted their trajectory, keeping the ship angled behind a massive hull fragment. For a moment, it seemed the drone might move on, its sensors sweep incomplete. Then it stopped, turning sharply toward the power. Contact! Chris fired, his shot precise. The drone exploded in a burst of sparks, but its destruction triggered a cascading reaction. Lights flickered on across the field as dormant war machines came to life. Dozens of drones emerged from hiding, their weapons glowing ominously. Samir full speed. John barked. Gearhead, give me everything the engines have. The ship lurched forward, its thrusters roaring as it weaved through the debris. Plasma fire streaked past the viewports, close enough to light up the bridge. Chris fired from his pod, his shots taking out drones with surgical precision, but their numbers were overwhelming. We're not going to outrun them, Samir said, his voice grim. They're too fast. John's mind raced. There had to be a way. Gearhead, can you overload the drone sensors? Maybe, Lucas replied, but it's going to fry our comms and half the ship's electronics. Do it, John ordered. We'll deal with the fallout later. Lucas's curses echoed over the comm as he worked, and moments later, a blinding pulse of energy radiated from the power. The drones faltered, their movements erratic as their systems scrambled to recover. The crew seized the opportunity, pushing the ship into the heart of the debris field. The pulse bought them time, but it wasn't enough to stop the inevitable. As the ship neared the relic's location, a larger threat emerged, a colossal automated warship, its hull bristling with weaponry. The ancient vessel rumbled to life, its cannons swiveling toward the power. Targets locked, Samir said, his voice tight. We can't take a direct hit from that thing. John gritted his teeth. Chris, find me a weak spot. The sniper scanned the warship, his eyes narrowing as he spotted a faint glow near its aft section. There, reactor vent. If we hit it, we might overload its core. Might? John asked. It's all we've got, Chris replied. John nodded. Samir, get us into position. Gearhead, prep the main cannon. Chris, make it count. The ship roared toward the warship, dodging its initial salvo. The relic's energy pulses grew stronger, guiding them closer to their goal even as the warship loomed larger. Chris lined up his shot, steadying his breath. The crew held theirs. The crack of his rifle echoed through the ship, and the round struck true. The warship shuddered, its core flickering as energy arcs danced across its hull. Then, with a deafening roar, it exploded, a wave of debris scattering in all directions. The power barely escaped the blast radius, its shields flickering under the strain. The bridge erupted in cheers, but John remained focused. The relic's signal was stronger than ever, and the source was now visible, a pulsating, crystalline structure embedded in the largest asteroid. "Bring us in close," John ordered. "Chris, gearhead, you with me. Samir, keep the ship ready for a quick extraction." The trio suited up and entered the airlock. The asteroid surface was jagged and uneven, the relic embedded in a crevice that glowed with an unearthly light. As they approached, a low hum filled the air, resonating deep in their chests. "This thing's alive," Chris said, his tone wary. "Not alive," Lucas corrected, "but it's definitely more than just a rock." John stepped forward, his hand hovering near the relic. "Stay sharp. If the relic's protected by more than just machines, we'll need to think fast." As his fingers brushed the surface, the hum intensified and the light flared, enveloping them in a blinding glow. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then a voice, ancient and cold, echoed in their minds. "Prove your worth." John looked to his team, his jaw tightening. "We've come this far. Let's finish it." The challenge had only just begun. The power returned to the Empire's central station, battered but victorious. Its hull bore the scars of battle, its systems strained to their limits, but the relic now rested securely in its cargo bay, pulsing faintly as if it were alive. Word of their success had already spread, and when the docking clamps hissed into place, a crowd of alien dignitaries and military officials awaited them. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to thinly veiled contempt. John Renholm led his crew down the ramp, their boots echoing against the polished floor. Chris Vane carried the relic in a reinforced containment case, its glow visible even through the layers of shielding. Lucas Grayson and Samir Afolayan followed close behind, their postures straight despite the exhaustion etched into their faces. At the forefront of the gathering stood the Zilthorian envoy, its translucent skin pulsating with barely concealed agitation. Beside it, an assortment of alien commanders and bureaucrats murmured among themselves, their disdain palpable. The human survival, let alone success, defied every expectation. "Captain Renholm," the envoy said, its voice clipped, "you return intact. An outcome we did not anticipate." John stopped a few paces away, his face a mask of calm. "We were given an impossible mission and told to make it work. That's what we do." The Zilthorian's gelatinous eyes flicked to the relic. "And the artifact?" Chris stepped forward, setting the case down with deliberate care. Delivered as requested, the crowd's murmurs grew louder. The relic's energy pulsed in response, casting eerie patterns across the room. The aliens exchanged uneasy glances, their superiority shaken by the sight of humans succeeding where their finest had failed. One of the commanders, a hulking Terethian with scales that shimmered in the station's light, stepped forward. "You expect us to believe this? Primitive crew accomplished what the Empire's elite could not." John's voice was steady, but there was steel beneath his words. "We didn't expect you to believe it. We expected to prove it." The Terethian growled low, but before it could retort, the Zilthorian raised a hand. "Enough." It turned back to John, its tone skeptical but grudging. "How?" John glanced at his crew. "We're not bound by the same rules you are. Humans adapt. We think sideways when a problem doesn't have a clear solution. That's why we're still here." The envoy's features tightened. "Adaptation is not strategy. This success does not elevate your species." Lucas stepped forward, his voice sharper than John's measured tone. "Doesn't it? Your ships got torn apart in that belt. Your machines couldn't outsmart the defenses. And yet, here we are, with the relic you said no one could reach. Samir added, maybe it's time you stopped looking down on us and started paying attention to what we're capable of. The silence that followed was deafening. The aliens' shame was palpable, their pride unable to mask the glaring truth. The humans had done what no one else could, and they'd done it with ingenuity, determination, and a refusal to quit. The Zilthorian finally spoke, its voice quieter but no less cutting. You risk much by speaking so boldly. John stepped closer, his posture unyielding. We risked everything on this mission. That's what we do. We survive because we don't have the luxury of arrogance. If you want to dismiss us, go ahead, but you can't deny the results. The relic pulsed brighter, as if emphasizing his words. The Zilthorian stared at it, its expression inscrutable, before gesturing to a pair of attendants. They stepped forward, carefully lifting the containment case as if it might explode at any moment. The High Council will evaluate this artifact, the envoy said. Your task is complete. You may return to your vessel. John nodded, but as he turned to leave, the Terethian commander growled again. You won't get recognition for this. The Empire won't elevate your kind. John paused, glancing over his shoulder. We don't need your recognition. We've already proven ourselves. The crew of the Power walked away, their heads held high despite the weight of exhaustion. Behind them, the aliens stood in awkward silence, their collective pride fractured. For all their advanced technology and centuries of dominance, they'd been bested by the very species they considered beneath them. Back aboard the Power, the crew settled into the familiar hum of their ship. Lucas slumped into a chair, rubbing his temples. Think they'll actually admit we did something right? Samir chuckled, leaning back in his seat. Not a chance. But they'll remember this. And the next time they need something impossible done, guess who they'll call? Not exactly a reward, Chris said, his voice dry. John stood at the bridge, looking out at the vastness of space. Maybe not, but we've shown them what we're capable of. That's a step forward, whether they admit it or not. The crew fell into a companionable silence, the weight of their mission finally lifting. They had faced the impossible and come out the other side, not just as survivors, but as proof that humanity had a place in the galaxy. And while the Empire might never give them the recognition they deserved, they had earned something far more valuable: pride in who they were and what they could accomplish. As the Power powered up its engines, the faint glow of the relic faded into memory, but its legacy would remain, a reminder to the galaxy that humans, underestimated and overlooked, could rise to any challenge and leave their mark in the stars.